Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to explore a topic that challenges everything most men have been taught about navigating communication with women. And it starts with this simple truth. You don't always need to speak to be understood or respected. Think about it. How many times have you found yourself in a conversation, or even a heated argument, with a woman, whether it's your partner, a colleague, or someone close to you, and no matter how calmly or you try to express yourself, you end up feeling unheard, dismissed, or emotionally worn out? It's frustrating, and it feels like a losing battle for many men. We're taught that respect comes from having the right words, defending our point, and being quick and clever in the moment. But here's the hidden truth that few talk about. Real power often lies not in what you say, but in what you choose not to say. This video is for the men tired of feeling like they're always reacting, always trying to explain themselves, always chasing peace in conversations designed to create chaos. Today we will uncover how silence can shift the dynamic completely when used with confidence and purpose. It's not about playing games or being cold. It's about reclaiming your presence, self-respect, and influence in a way that words often can't. So stick around until the end, because we're going to walk through the psychology, the strategies, and the mindset that'll help you outsmart any woman, not through arguments, but through quiet mastery. Let's get into it. Number 1. The trap of talking too much. Many men are conditioned to believe that words equal value from a young age. They're taught to explain themselves, justify their actions, and always have an answer ready, because silence for them feels like failure. So in conversation, especially with women they admire, they try to fill every pause, clarify every gesture, and explain every thought, as if their worth depends on being understood in real time. But the truth is, the more a man talks, the more he risks revealing what she's quietly listening for beneath the surface: his emotional need for approval. Talking too much is rarely just about being expressive. It often stems from subtle anxiety. The man who overshares usually doesn't realize he's doing it to calm himself, seek comfort through constant connection, and maintain control over an uncertain interaction. But women, especially those who are emotionally intelligent, can feel this. They don't need to analyze it consciously. They sense it in his rushing words, his explanations that run too long, and his need to fix every silence. They detect a soft undercurrent of insecurity. And while they may not judge him harshly, they instinctively respond to what feels ungrounded. The more he talks, the more it feels like he's trying to win her, not stand with her. There's a powerful alternative, but it takes strength: strategic silence. A man who's grounded in himself doesn't need to over-explain or impress. He can let her question hang in the air. He can absorb her emotions without rushing to fix them. He doesn't fear the quiet between sentences, because he understands that presence doesn't require noise. Silence becomes his ally. It invites curiosity. It creates space for her to lean in, wonder, and feel a tension that draws her closer rather than pushes her away. Many men don't realize that mystery is not about withholding, it's about pacing. Silence says, "I'm not here to convince you. I'm here to be known, if you're curious enough to look closer." And when a woman meets a man who doesn't need to speak, who lets his calm do the talking constantly, she listens more carefully. Not because he's loud, but because he's rare. The most magnetic conversations are not filled with words. They are shaped by what's left unsaid. When a man can resist the urge to explain every feeling, defend every decision, or narrate every thought, he becomes more than just charming, trustworthy. because confidence doesn't shout, it stands quietly and lets others discover its truth. Number 2. The archetype of the silent, grounded man. He doesn't speak to fill space or explain to gain approval. His silence is not emptiness, it is presence. In a world where most men rush to prove themselves with words, he remains still, composed and unbothered. He walks into a room and says nothing, yet somehow people notice. That is the power of the grounded man. He does not dominate with noise, but with centered energy. There's no need to raise his voice because his calm carries weight. This man isn't quiet because he lacks things to say. He's silent because he doesn't need to say everything. He listens, he observes, and in that restraint lies his control. While others speak from insecurity, he speaks only when he chooses. His silence isn't passive, it's deliberate. Every pause, every glance, every decision not to respond creates space for curiosity. People lean in, wanting more, not less. Women, in particular, feel the pull. They sense something behind the quiet isn't being given away. That psychological presence begins to grow without effort. He does not need to defend himself in debates or rush to correct misconceptions. He lets others speak freely while he listens without reacting. That disarms people, especially women who are used to men over-explaining or chasing validation. There's nothing to chase with him because nothing is being offered too easily. His calm makes others feel uncertain, and in that uncertainty he becomes unforgettable. It is not arrogance, it's gravity, and gravity does not ask to be noticed. What makes this man different is not that he says less, but that he carries more. Emotional clarity, internal peace, an unshakable center that doesn't move with every opinion in the room. When others try to provoke him, he does not take the bait. When someone questions his silence, he meets it with presence, not performance. He doesn't need to be loud because he knows exactly who he is. This kind of man destabilizes women not by playing games, but by being unreadable in a way that invites reflection. He doesn't give away his emotions like open currency. He doesn't explain why he's distant. He simply is. That alone creates a space where a woman must come forward if she wants to know more. She must engage. She must lean into the mystery, and that's when the dynamic shifts. Instead of pursuing, he becomes the gravity she orbits, not through effort but through embodiment. A grounded man isn't mysterious because he hides things. He's mysterious because he doesn't need the world to confirm what he already knows about himself. In a world of noise, his silence becomes the loudest presence in the room. And for a woman used to reading men easily, this kind of man feels like an enigma she can't solve. That puzzle doesn't frustrate, it intrigues. It doesn't repel, it draws her in. Respect isn't demanded with this man, it's earned without trying. Because the world respects what it can't quite define, and a man who needs no explanation needs no defense. He speaks when necessary and rests in silence when words would only lessen his presence. He does not chase attention, he simply exists with clarity and strength, and that is what makes him unforgettable. Number 3. The psychology of silence in male-female interactions. In the dynamic between men and women, silence is rarely just the absence of speech. It's an invisible presence that changes the room's tone and the conversation's direction. It becomes disarming when a man holds silence, not out of avoidance, but from a place of calm self-possession. Women are often more attuned to emotional exchange and instinctively lean into conversation as a tool to connect, interpret, and influence. But when that tool no longer functions as they expect, silence starts to echo louder than words ever could. Silence forces an energy shift. Suddenly, without emotional feedback or immediate response, she's left facing her own words without a reflection to bounce them off. She begins questioning what she said, how it landed, and what you might think. That uncertainty can be deeply unsettling, not because you're trying to provoke it, but because it breaks the usual interaction pattern. It holds up a mirror that doesn't smile, nod, or explain, and that kind of mirror forces reflection. In many male-female interactions, emotional feedback becomes an unspoken currency. There's an expected return when she shares something, a reaction that reassures, clarifies, or challenges. But take that away, and the dynamic begins to shift. Your silence becomes the center of gravity, pulling her inward, triggering introspection, and sometimes even vulnerability. The more still you remain, the more noise she may begin to feel internally. That's not manipulation. That's the psychology of presence, holding your ground without performing. This is why silence feels so powerful. In the absence of noise, people project. They fill the space with assumptions, fears, hopes, or regrets. A woman might begin to speak more freely or reveal more than she intended because the silence presses her to explain or justify. Or she may fall quiet, suddenly aware that the script she's used before no longer fits. Without your reactions, she has nothing to shape her words around, and in that space, she begins to feel the edges of who you are, not who you're trying to be to win her over, but the stillness of someone who doesn't need to be understood to know his worth. This kind of silence requires strength. It's not coldness, it's not withdrawal, it's discipline, the ability to sit in discomfort without rushing to fix it or to fill a pause, simply to ease tension. It's restraint, rooted in self-respect. You don't need to over-explain to be understood. You don't need to match her emotions to prove empathy. And most of all, you don't need to react just because the moment demands it. When you learn to hold your silence with integrity, it becomes your language that communicates confidence, clarity, and emotional control. Some of the most unforgettable men aren't the ones who always had the right words. They're the ones who knew when not to speak. Because in that silence, they left space for truth to emerge, for others to feel the weight of their presence, and for connection to grow from something more profound than conversation. Number 4. Using silence strategically. There are moments in a relationship where saying less reveals more. When emotions run high or tension fills the room, the instinct to react quickly can be overwhelming. But actual influence often lies not in your words, but in your restraint. A man who knows how to use silence purposefully holds a quiet kind of power, a steady center in the storm of emotional volatility. She expects an emotional return when she pushes for a reaction, throws out sharp words, or asks probing questions. She expects an emotional return. But something shifts when you resist that urge. Hold still and let her sit in the echo of her intensity. The spotlight moves. The silence you allow becomes a mirror, and she starts to hear herself more clearly. Listening with intention is not passive, it's a form of awareness. You don't just hear the words, but notice the pauses, the emotional tremors in her voice, the places where her story wavers. In those gaps, you find her truth, unspoken but exposed. By not filling the silence, you give her the space to unfold. In that space, she often reveals more than she planned. People tend to rush to fill the silence, but when you let the pause linger, something deeper always rises. She may over-explain, backtrack, or reveal her insecurity, not because you forced her to, but because your calm made her confront her emotional noise. This kind of silence isn't coldness, it's presence without pressure. It's the stillness that says, "I see everything, and I'm not moved." Your eye contact, steady breath, and even a slight smile communicate more than a defensive reply ever could. Predictivity gives away power, but you reset the emotional rhythm when your response is grounded, deliberate, and unexpected. She begins to adjust to your energy because you've stopped adjusting to hers. There's a quiet discipline in active silence. It's not avoidance. It's not shutting down. It's engagement on your terms. You show you won't be pulled into chaos or swayed by emotional bait. And that makes you the anchor. In that moment, she's no longer leading the dynamic. You are. Because when you don't react, she must reflect. When you don't rush to respond, she must reckon with the space you've left behind. Purposeful silence is not about winning a moment. It's about creating emotional gravity. It's about knowing that control is rarely loud. Actual influence often comes without needing to raise your voice. It's in how you hold your frame when others lose theirs. And the man who can stand still while everything around him pulls for reaction is the one who's truly leading the interaction. Number 5. Avoid the trap of passive silence. There's a silence that weakens you and a silence that commands respect. The difference lies not in the absence of words, but in the presence or absence of inner strength. Too often men fall into the trap of passive silence. They go quiet not because they are composed, but because they are unsure, uncomfortable, or afraid of confrontation. That kind of silence is not strength, it's retreat, and some women, especially those who test boundaries, can sense it. To them, passive silence is an opening, a moment to push further, take control of the dynamic, and dominate the space you refuse to stand tall in. When your silence comes from avoidance, it speaks louder than you realize. It signals you're afraid to take a stand, unsure of your value, unwilling to risk friction. Over time, this kind of silence doesn't create peace, it invites imbalance. It teaches her that your voice is optional, your presence negotiable, and your limits unclear. And in relationships, unclear boundaries always become opportunities for manipulation, not because women are inherently manipulative, but because human nature tests the edges of what it's given. Someone else will decide for you if you don't show where you stand. But silence doesn't have to be a sign of surrender. When chosen deliberately, it becomes one of your most powerful tools. Purposeful silence isn't about saying nothing. It's about letting your stillness speak with certainty. When you are clear about your values and know what you will and won't tolerate, you don't need to fill every space with explanation. You don't react to every provocation. You don't justify your presence. You stand firm, and in that quiet firmness you show strength. There's a kind of man who doesn't need to argue to win. He doesn't need to speak to lead. His silence isn't passive, it's strategic. He's not avoiding the moment, he's controlling it by refusing to be emotionally pulled into chaos. That kind of presence can't be faked. It's built on clarity, purpose, and the quiet confidence of someone who knows his worth. He doesn't collapse into passivity when she pushes. He holds the frame, and in doing so he earns respect, not through words, but through the unwavering steadiness of his silence. Men often think that speaking up is the only way to assert themselves, But in reality, the most powerful assertion is non-reactivity, to stay grounded when provoked, to remain calm when tested, to choose stillness not out of fear but out of focus. That is the silence of a man who's not trying to win an argument but maintaining integrity. He doesn't let noise distort his values. He doesn't speak to seek approval. His silence says, "I see what's happening," and choose not to dance to that tune. In relationships, this kind of silence is a mirror. It reflects her behavior to her without judgment or emotional escalation. If she respects you, she'll notice. If she doesn't, you'll see it clearly, and from there you'll know what to do. Either way, you remain anchored, because an anchored man doesn't flinch when the waves rise. So don't confuse silence with surrender. The silence that earns respect is chosen, not forced. It's rooted in principle, not fear. And it's this kind of silence, the one that holds the line without raising a voice, that leaves the most profound impact. Number 6. Becoming a master of silent influence. There's a form of influence most men underestimate, not in what they say but in what they withhold. Silence isn't weakness, and it isn't withdrawal. It's a force of presence, a clear statement that doesn't beg to be understood but demands attention. When a woman is used to words filling every pause, to explanations softening every moment of tension, your decision to stay quiet sends a more profound message. You're not afraid of discomfort. You're not seeking approval. You're simply grounded, and your energy speaks louder than your voice ever could. Many men use silence as a retreat, stepping back out of fear of conflict or rejection. That's not power. That's avoidance. Absolute masculine silence comes from strength, not needing to fix, not needing to convince, not needing to win her over. You're present, you're watching, and she feels it. When she expects a reaction in moments of emotional heat, your stillness becomes the unexpected response, and it changes everything. Because you're not reacting, you're leading. Women are drawn to men who carry calm with them. It's not about being cold or distant. It's about being unmoved by chaos. The moment you stop needing to explain yourself is when you begin to be truly seen. When you meet her intensity not with louder words but with unwavering quiet, you introduce a dynamic she doesn't encounter often. She becomes more aware of herself. She notices her patterns. Your silence becomes a mirror. Your silence becomes a mirror. This is where real influence begins, not in trying to dominate the conversation but in shaping its tone without raising your voice. Eye contact was held steadily without rush. Body language that says, "I'm here, I'm unshaken." A pause that lingers just long enough to make her lean in. You don't need to control her emotions. You only need to stay anchored in yours. And that quiet composure will often do more to change the energy in a room than any clever phrase could. So the next time you feel that emotional tension rise, the urge to explain, defend, or plead, try something else. Say less, observe more, let the silence breathe. Let her see you're not disturbed by the moment, because silence isn't the absence of something. It's the presence of everything she wasn't prepared to feel. And when you master that, you become unforgettable. Ultimately, actual influence doesn't come from saying the right words. It comes from becoming the kind of man who doesn't need to speak to be understood. When you learn to harness the power of silence with purpose and presence, you shift the dynamic entirely. You no longer chase approval, argue to be heard, or explain yourself into exhaustion. Instead, you embody calm authority, emotional control, and quiet confidence, the traits that make others lean in, reflect, and ultimately respect you. This isn't about playing games or withholding for power. It's about reclaiming your space in the conversation without needing to dominate it. When you stop reacting and start observing, when you stop talking and start being, you become the anchor in every interaction. Women and people respond to that energy, not because you force it, but because you embody it. Now it's your turn. Have you ever experienced a moment where silence gave you more control than words ever could? How has staying quiet changed the way others respond to you? Share your experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more insights on self-mastery, emotional strength, and the subtle art of influence. See you in the next one.